My name is Eli. I am 34 years old, and I am living someone else's life. Every morning starts the same. Alarm at 6:30, coffee without sugar, shower, makeup on autopilot. My husband Vince, as usual, drinks tea in the kitchen, silently scrolling through the news. We hardly talk. Over the past 2 years, our conversations have become like business correspondence. Did you take the car? Yes. Will you pay for the internet? I will. Have you talked to Anna about the weekend? I have. That's it? Sometimes I remember how we met 17 years ago, at university. He was cheerful, loud, self-confident. I was a shadow. It seemed to me that he was the light. And I followed him. The move, the wedding, the mortgage, the job, everything happened as if by itself. I didn't make decisions. I agreed. Because it was right. Now we have 2 children, a large apartment in a quiet area, a decent job, and oppressive silence. I do everything as expected. Pick up the kids, go to the office, buy fruit, iron shirts, smile when necessary, answer calls, post photos on social networks, family dinner, weekend with loved ones. In these photos, I am happy, but in life, I am empty. 2 years ago, I caught myself thinking I don't feel anything at all. No joy, no anger, no irritation, no pleasure. Only anxiety, even fatigue. I thought it was burnout. I went to a psychologist. She asked, "When was the last time you did something for yourself?" I couldn't answer. I was ashamed because I didn't remember. Sometimes I stood at the stove with a saucepan in my hand and looked out the window at my neighbor smoking on the balcony. He seemed relaxed, present, as if his day was his own, and mine. Mine was a to-do list. One day, completely by chance, I went out for an evening walk alone. No husband, no kids, no destination. I just left home without saying where. I got on a bus and rode to the end of the route. I got off in a neighborhood I'd never been to. I bought a pie, sat on a bench, and watched the rain fall. It was the first time in years that I felt alive. And I started repeating it. Every Friday evening walks. I said I was meeting friends. In reality, I was just driving to nowhere. I looked at people, at other people's houses, at shop windows. Sometimes I went into cheap coffee shops where no one knew me. I began to feel I have myself. One of those Fridays, I met Dan. He worked in an old workshop, fixing watches. I went there by chance, just to get out of the wind. He was older than me, with gray temples and warm eyes. He smiled and offered me some tea. We started talking. He asked me what I did. I lied and said I was an artist. I don't know why. I just wanted to be someone else. I went there for a few weeks. I just sat, drank tea, listened to him take apart his watch, tell stories. There was no flirting, no attempt to get closer. But I was drawn there as if it was the only place where I was accepted. Not the pretender, but the real me. One day I told him, I'm not an artist. I'm just a woman who doesn't know who she is anymore. He looked at me and said, then start getting to know me. No drama, just a quiet phrase that settled inside me like a seed. I started writing. Short texts first in a notebook, then on a laptop. Sometimes at night, when everyone was asleep. It was stupid, incoherent, but I didn't care. It was me, ... But the more I came to my senses, the more clearly I saw. The life I was living was not mine. I love my children, but I don't like the role of the perfect mother. I respect Vince, but I understand. I lived at his pace, according to his rules. I didn't want a house with a fireplace. I wanted to go to Bergen, to see the fjords. I didn't want to save money on every trip to pay for unnecessary furniture. I didn't want to be afraid to admit to myself that I was scared, that I was tired, that I was different. One day, when I returned from a walk, I found Vince in the kitchen. He was waiting for me. He was holding my notebook. He read it. He said, "Is this about us?" I was silent. "Are you unhappy?" I nodded. He went into the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen. And I didn't follow him. And the silence in which I heard myself. That was a year and a half ago. Now we have joint custody. Vince and I are not enemies. He says he didn't recognize me, and in a way, he's right. I didn't recognize myself. But now, I do. I didn't become a famous writer. I didn't start from scratch. I didn't go to Bali. My life remained simple. But now, every morning, I wake up and know that this day is mine. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. At first, it was hard. Very hard. I woke up in silence, in an empty room in which there was no smell of coffee, no children's footsteps, no rustle of a family mourning. Just me and emptiness. At first, I felt guilty for leaving, for not fighting, for putting myself above the common good. I lay for hours, staring at the ceiling, playing out scenarios in my head in which everything could have been different. I tried to understand, at what point did I stop being myself? The days were long. But it was precisely in this length that I began to remember who I am, what I love, what I am afraid of. I started reading again. Not instructions, not work correspondence, not parental advice, but real books. Complex, sharp, not always pleasant. The kind that left something more inside than just knowledge. I started drawing, not for exhibitions, not for social networks, but simply because I needed to express myself. With colors, shapes, lines, my art was chaotic. It had no style, but it was me. Real, broken, alive. I quit my job 3 months after moving, not because I couldn't cope, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. My position had always seemed safe to me, structured, understandable, respected. But now it was like a suit that wasn't tailored to me. I wrote my resignation and left empty-handed, but with a light back my mother didn't understand. She said that I had destroyed the family, that with my education and standard of living, I could endure it. Many people endure it. I was silent. Because I didn't have the words to explain what it was like to live every day as a fake version of myself. My former friends distanced themselves, some out of pity, some out of condemnation, some because I no longer fit into their rhythm. And I didn't hold on. I let people go. Not because I was angry, but because I realized a relationship in which you are loved only for convenience is not a relationship. I started working in a studio at a community center. I taught classes for teenagers on the basics of drawing, composition, color. It didn't bring in much money, but it gave me a feeling of being needed. Not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a person. Girls with dull eyes came to me and asked if it was possible to draw sadness. I said, not only possible, but also necessary. At times I was scared, very scared. Sometimes, at night, I would wake up in a panic that I had ruined everything, that I was alone, that I had chosen a path that had no guarantees. But then I remembered, before, I woke up and felt nothing. And now, I feel. Even if it is fear. Over time, the children began to spend the night at my place. At first, hesitantly, with questions, I did not hide my mistakes or my pain. But I was there. Always. Attentively, honestly, truly. I wasn't playing a role. I was just their mother, alive, tired, real. I didn't put on makeup every day anymore. Not because I'd given up, but because I'd stopped hiding my face. My face had become mine. Over time, I began to see it in the mirror, not as someone else's mask, but as a part of myself that had been returned. I didn't need salvation. I didn't need a miracle. I didn't need someone to come and tell me how to live. I just wanted to be. And to be honest, almost 2 years have passed. I rented a studio, a small room in the attic where it smells of wood, and through the window you can see the roofs of the neighboring houses. There I write about the women who left, about those who stayed, about those who one day decide, enough. My texts are read, not millions, but dozens, sometimes hundreds. Sometimes someone writes to me, thank you. I feel the same way. And I know, not in vain. I rented a studio, a small room in the attic, where it smells of wood, and through the window you can see the roofs of the neighboring houses. There, I write. I write about the women who left, about those who stayed, about those who one day decide, enough. My texts are read, not millions, but dozens, sometimes hundreds. Sometimes someone writes to me, thank you, I feel the same way, and I know, not in vain.